Hi, everyone. My name is Jim Nemitz, and I'm the president of the West Virginia School of Osteopathic Medicine, and I'm here with my colleague.
I'm Davina Panot, the Associate Dean for Research and Sponsored Programs at WVSOM.
We recently hosted an incredible event on our campus that we call WVSOM Bio. And it started off with a groundbreaking for our $35 million expansion of our research facility. To offer more research opportunity for our students and faculty. But it was followed by an economic development forum. And the reason for that is when we were designing this building, we created a third floor shell because what we want to do is we want to bring and create a biotech hub here in the Greenbrier Valley.
The panels were excellent with a breadth of expertise ranging from research to policy to commercialization, and they had discussions on bioscience opportunities at WVSOM in the Greenbrier Valley and the state of West Virginia.
The panels were incredible. We had experts from the federal, state, and local levels talking about creating a biotech hub here in the Greenbrier Valley. So if you couldn't attend or you'd like to see the panels again, please tune in and watch them on our website.
And if you have any other questions, please feel free to contact me or Don Smith at WVSOM.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And now for our first panel. Will the biosciences and pharma industry consider West Virginia? It is my great honor to introduce Fredric W, Senior Vice President, State Government Affairs and Affiliate Relations of Bio International, and Mark Bates, MD, CAMC cardiologist and nationally recognized clinician, innovator, and entrepreneur, and Brian Brown, Executive Director, Bioscience Association of West Virginia. Good morning, gentlemen. Fredric, you will be the first presenter.
Good morning. My name is Fredric W. I'm Senior Vice President for State Government Affairs and Affiliate Relations at Bio, the Biotechnology Innovation Organization. Dr. Nimitz explained our conference earlier. I wish we could hire Dr. Nimitz to be our marketer for our conference because it is a very big conference. We have one every year. It is probably the seminal biotech conference in the world. We had actually over 20,000 registrants in Boston. Will be in San Diego next year, and we hope to see many of you there in San Diego next year. But we're the global trade association that represents the biopharmaceutical industry. Our members span the breadth of the entire industry. We have large multinational pharma companies, Merck, Amgen, Genentech as members, but we also represent small startup pre-revenue companies, or what we call clinical companies, companies where there's not yet a product on the market, and they may only have 100 or so employees. And what I'd like to talk about today is where the industry is going, where the innovation's coming from, and then talk a little bit about what makes a specific geographic area a good area for clinical trial investment. And I do have to say, and Brian and I talked about this a lot, I do have deep roots in West Virginia. I'm a WVU grad, very proud of being a WVU grad. And then I worked for a few years right out of college for Congressman Wise when he was a congressman, before he became governor, and worked with Mike Fulton, who's in the front row at Ryan McGinn. So I have a lot of connections to West Virginia. I'm very proud to be here, and that's one of the reasons I'm here today. So first, in terms of total employment, the bioscience industry is one of the very strategic industries for the U.S. We employ roughly 2.3 million direct employees, and for every direct employee of the bioscience industry, there's what they call a 5-factor for employment, which means for every one person employed directly by the industry, there's another 5 ancillary people that are employed doing various things and supporting roles for the industry. So it's a rather large industry that accounts for roughly $3.2 trillion in the U.S. economy. While it seems to be clustered in certain areas, and I think Dr. Nimitz referenced this earlier, the industry, there's a very high proportion of the industry in Cambridge and Boston, Massachusetts, San Diego, San Francisco, North Carolina, the sort of Philadelphia, New York corridor with Jersey in the middle. But it is growing in other areas. And I would say that companies are looking, every ecosystem has something different about it which makes it special, and companies either are being spun out of academic research facilities and are growing in certain areas, or there are certain clusters that large biopharma companies find attractive, whether it's cost of living. I would say the biggest thing is probably workforce, but we're seeing the industry growing in Texas. You have clusters growing in Illinois, around the Chicago area. So I would say the industry is branching out from what I would call its traditional hubs. In West Virginia, so we do, first of all, we do a report every 2 years. We call it our jobs report, and I will, at the end of the presentation, I'll show you how to get access to it, but it's on our website. We look at the bioscience industry as a whole, and then we break it down into states as well. And this includes not just biopharma, but these are really anything. We term bioscience as anything in the life sciences. So it could be device manufacturers, it could be distributors. This could also be ag biotech. This could be biotech manufacturing and biopharma. So these are the numbers for West Virginia, and these are 2023 numbers. This report comes out every 2 years. We'll have our next one coming out next year in 2026. But in 2023, there were over 5,000 people employed by the industry, over 700 establishments in West Virginia. The R&D expenditures, $1.617 million, which is a nice amount of money, and then NIH funding at $54 million. And you know, in hearing earlier today, and I've always known this, that I do think there's a specialty with West Virginia, especially in therapeutic areas that would help with health outcomes in rural areas, and I think that is something that should be focused on, I think, more in this state, because I think there's an appetite, especially with a lot of companies with the GLP-1s that are coming out, looking at diabetes and addiction and various other sort of health disparities in rural America. But I think West Virginia has a very good foundation in this area. But what I will say is the industry is facing some headwinds. We are still growing, but not at the clips we were growing with right during the pandemic as we were developing vaccines and therapies for the pandemic. So job growth is actually, the rate of growth has gone down. I would say there's several factors to this. Access to capital. VC funding is down. Interest rates go up, funding gets scarce. I think that's one of the reasons. The other reason is unfortunately right now, there's some uncertainty with federal dollars. We're seeing some issues with NIH grant funding. The FDA is probably going to go through some major revisions under the Trump administration some of it we're very supportive of. We need to make the FDA more efficient. Some of it we recognize could be challenges for the industry. And there's also, China is becoming an increasingly competitive threat to the U.S. in this industry sector. The Congress established a bipartisan commission on biosecurity that just released a report in April that laid out where China is becoming very good at running clinical trials, more efficiently, more quickly, manufacturing more efficiently and quickly, and their science is becoming on par with, and their technology is on par with a lot of the science coming out of U.S. companies. So there were, I think, roughly about 16 or 17, no, I'm sorry, there were 20 plus recommendations in this report that the federal government should look at to help secure the U.S.'s preeminence in the biosciences, but China's quickly catching up. We've also seen this in the amount of announced layoffs and job cuts. This graph shows that. This looks at from Q1 2021 to Q1 2025, where there were roughly 3,000, almost 4,000 job losses in the industry. Again, this is not to say we're not growing. We're growing. I would say that companies that have good science and that are meeting an unmet medical need, that will always grow. But it is just becoming more difficult. The headwinds are stronger for the industry. Also, as I mentioned earlier, public investment into R&D stage companies is very challenging, again, because capital is very hard to come by. But you can see this chart shows IPOs and follow-on public offerings in the US, which is still clearly the leader by far, and the rest of the world. But if you look at the vitality of the IPO and FPO sector, that it shows, if it's strong, it shows investor appetite is strong, access to capital is open, the markets are confident about the industry. So it's still bullish in the US, but not as robust as it was a couple years ago. And then finally, I just want to go through, this is basically another version of what I talked about before. I'd like to talk about new drug approvals and where small companies are really where a lot of the innovation is happening. And there is an ecosystem. You have the large companies like Merck, Amgen, Genentech that have the capital and still pump out a lot of good science, but really the innovation is happening in the small company space, and these tend to be more biotech focused. A lot of these now are gene therapy companies, cell therapy companies. And if you look at FDA approvals in 2024, of those, 36 came from emerging or small companies, and 18 came from large, sort of like what we call the large biopharma companies. But the point I want to make is the innovation, these small companies are attracting some of the best scientists in the world and really spinning out some of the best technology that's out there. And the pipeline, again, this basically says the same thing, but the pipeline is really is growing still. Again, good science. There's always a market for good science. So there's a lot of technology that is under clinical trial development. We have roughly in 2025, over 23,000 clinical trial programs going on in the world. That pipeline is broken down to these therapeutic areas. Oncology is always the biggest, remains the biggest, with about 45% of the clinical trial pipeline focused on oncology. Neurology, number 2, infectious disease, number 3. I would say in all of these, I would go back to, if I can go back one, 20% of new drugs in development, and this is very interesting, are in the rare disease space. And this is for several reasons. A, like I said earlier, unmet medical need will always drive growth. This is an area of unmet medical need. These products tend to be reimbursed more easily than a chronic disease medication. So there's a lot of work, especially in the small emerging biotech companies in the rare disease space. And that seems to be where a lot of the funding is going. It's not to say that chronic conditions are not being paid attention to, but there's a lot of work happening in the rare disease space in the pipeline. And finally, I do want to talk about clinical trials and why sites are considered, why these certain geographic areas are the top 10 clinical trial geographic centers in the country. And there is a connection, or there's a consistency with all these sites. They've got, some of them have a large industry presence, but the biggest thing is the academic research that's going on there. And you'll see that, obviously, as Dr. Nimitz said earlier, Boston, Northeast is very preeminent in this, with Boston, New York, Philadelphia, West Coast, and then I would say that with Cleveland, in Ohio with the Cleveland Clinic, and they have National Regenerative Medicine Center there, as well as in Rochester with the Mayo Clinic, are very strong clinical trial places. And then Houston is becoming, and San Antonio are becoming, or I should say Texas is becoming, a rather significant place to conduct clinical trials. But when you look at clinical trials, and I think, we heard about this earlier, that there are several factors. One is access to patients. And, I have a lot of friends that are in clinical trial work, and I was having a conversation this weekend with a friend of mine who ran clinical trials at Johnson & Johnson. The number one most important factor in selecting a place for a clinical trial is access to patients or enrolled patients and a diverse patient population. That's probably the most important thing. The second is the workforce. You're going to have a team of not only researchers, but research coordinators that can effectively run a trial efficiently and get the data together so the company can use it. Lab capacity. Some access to VC funding, as well as NIH funding, infrastructure, which this area has, invested a lot not only in roads but also in energy. I just learned last night that West Virginia is an energy exporter. I never knew that. That's very good. And then obviously a very good quality of life. And those seem to be the key factors for where what forces companies to look at areas to run clinical trials. All of these, you can tell I pulled my slides from like 7 different presentations, but they were all generated from these reports, and you can access these. These are on our website, www.bio.org, News and Insights and Bio Reports, and you'll see the jobs report. You'll see the emerging company report that I just talked about that shows investment in the emerging companies. And then we also have a very good report that we're working on right now called our Emerging Practices Report, where we look at what states are doing in economic development and pulling out some of the best practices. And obviously Brian has access to that and can get that to anyone. And I know a lot of, we use that, we're talking to legislators about, we talk to legislators all the time about what can we do to bring the life sciences into our state. So we have this report that talks about some of the best practices that states use. So that's it.
Thank you, Patrick.
Yep.
Dr. Bates.
I'm going to get up if you don't mind. Can I borrow your?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I tend to pace about a little bit when I'm talking, so forgive me. But Patrick, I learned so much. And that first of all, it was really concise,
Thank
and
you.
there was a lot of information packed in there that is relevant to what you're trying to do. So I learned about this project 3 or 4 weeks ago. Sharon introduced me to Don, and we started talking on the phone, and I think Don could tell that he had me at hello on, what you're trying to do here, and it's near and dear to me. I'm also from West Virginia, and I'll talk a little bit about that, but I was asked to talk about 2 things. One is about my journey, and the other is some of the challenges that it takes to build innovation in West Virginia. But Patrick sort of touched on this, and so did Dr. Nimitz, the whole concept of a cluster. And cluster can mean different things, right? It can have different connotations, but don't let your mind drift. But there is something there that we need to unwrap a little bit, and I'll try to do that today. I was asked to give a talk, and actually this is a great example of why you don't trust AI. I put a picture of myself in there and asked for me looking over the mountains of West Virginia. And look at this guy, he's much better looking than I am, right? But the bottom line is that I'm looking, I was asked to give a talk about a few years ago, how do you become an end user innovator? And at the time, I had a family member who was diagnosed with cancer, and I don't know if any of you have ever been there when you got that call. In an evening where the biopsy's positive. It was Friday night for me, and it dropped me dead in my tracks. I was on multiple boards and involved in a lot of different things, but it really triggered an existential crisis for me. And thank God she's doing great today. But I started reflecting not on why or how I did what I've done, but why. Why do you extinguish weekends, evenings, and your team doing research? Man, I know what it takes to get papers over the line just as an academician, so hats off. And these medical students and people that, how do we engender passion in making a difference? And let me talk a little bit about, so I started in a 2-room house on a road called Sleepy Creek in Hurricane, West Virginia. And I have to say Hurricane correctly, right, in the West Virginia dialect. And most people thought, looking back, that I came from a life of scarcity. It was on a farm. I never felt scarcity. We all worked hard. We learned certain core values that were really baked into me, and I didn't even realize at the time. So as I'm looking back on my life, it was the value system, first of all, work ethic. It's easy to talk about and start innovation. It's hard to get it across the line. Yeah. I mean, sometimes it feels impossible. And you have to have that tenacity. And there's something about us, the people in this room or the people that you're welcome, you come into the family, right, when you come to West Virginia. You feel it, right? And we talk about, are we different? Yes, we're different. How do you cultivate that? And I think that, what does this have to do with innovation? I'll tell you. Fast forward, it's in the mid-1980s, and I look around the room, and most of you weren't even alive. Right? It's kind of scary to me now, speaking of existentialism. But I was a medical student, and they could tell I had this intense passion for new, exciting things. I was gravitating towards it, and I had an opportunity. A cardiologist came to me as a third-year medical student and said, "Do you want to scrub on a heart catheterization, an angioplasty?" Now, in the mid-'80s, there were no stents. Very few centers in the country were doing this because most people thought it was kind of nuts. But it was, basically you would go take a patient, put them on the table, and put a little tiny balloon inside I'm showing the picture of the original balloon that was FDA approved. And so I said, "Are you kidding? Put me in, coach." So I'm in the lab, and it was a defining moment for me. I was there just to sort of be able to feel, touch, things, and observing. And midway through the case, something goes wrong. The next thing you know, I find myself doing CPR on a 51-year-old woman that I had never met. We couldn't resuscitate her. We shocked, we're doing all these things. I was straddling this patient on a gurney, doing chest compressions, going down a hallway. They try to clear the hallway because the OR was 3 stories down. They're trying to clear the hallway, but I'm seeing people look out the rooms. They're terrified, right? And then we get to the OR, and they scrub my hands while they're scrubbing the patient's chest. And the surgeon comes in, and they crash her on the bypass, and we leave the cardiologist and I leave the OR after all that adrenaline sinking in, this patient probably won't survive. That night I spent time with the family. I shed tears with the family as a medical student. It was impactful for me. I went to see her in the ICU as she survived the surgery, but I started ruminating about it. I couldn't let it go. I thought, I kept annoying the cardiologist. What happened again? And he kept telling me, trying to explain. He was changing catheters, trying to go to a different size balloon. And these balloons, when you dilate them, are 0.14 inches diameter. And he was going to 0.16 millimeter diameter, or inch diameter. And so during that exchange, he lost access, and it started the cascade. So I couldn't sleep. I was thinking about it. I kept ruminating about it, and came up with a way of making a balloon that you can expand to different sizes. Simple. And it was a problem that had existed, and the company actually, they gave me a check for $10,000, which at the time was really exciting, and then they made a lot of money on it, right? But it went on to be one of the first systems and alternative. But why is this story important? This was my first, I had done some inventing before medical school, but this is my first medical device that I had actually invented, and it happened in West Virginia. I put this picture up because the other thing that happened, the Challenger exploded a week or so later, and that same day I go in the ICU and she's awake. The patient woke up. She came out of her coma. She left the hospital in 2.5 weeks with no neurologic deficits. But the bottom line is, what drives an innovator? What drives us? What caused me to extinguish weekends and evenings and not sleep when I saw a problem? And I say this because the same thing that drives an innovator is the same thing that drives a change agent. And the people here at this School of Osteopathic Medicine and the teaching centers, I see people around the room that are passionate about making a difference, and they're not driven by money. I see hospital teams here I've worked with, Dr. Takubo, other legislators. They're not driven by power and money. What's driving you? What's the magic sauce to creating something here that will become a legacy for Lewisburg? For me, I thought it was fear of failure. When I was dissecting this, looking back at my life, I did have a fear of failure, and I had to go towards that. I found myself really scared of scrubbing on cases and stuff. So I went in the opposite direction. By the time I was a 4th-year medical student, they said, "Get Bates to scrub on this case. Nobody wants to do it," right? But it really, that fear was driven by something else. It was driven by empathy. Most of what drives us to success in the healthcare sector that's sustainable is driven by caring for the patient. It's driven by caring for your students. It's driven by making the multiplier effect, knowing if your students do well, they're going to actually impact hundreds of lives later. So you're not only affecting the life of one patient, you're affecting the life of hundreds. If you make one invention, you can impact millions. So yeah, and it brings a source of pride, doesn't it, to the institution and to the community. We need that. It's really important. And then it doesn't help to be insatiable curiosity, to be a polymath, and all those things are important. But the bottom line to me is the cornerstone of who we are in this state is at least in part driven by the core values I mentioned. That's a drawing card to me to bring it home. I think it's important. If you haven't had a chance to read the School of Osteopathic Medicine, the first thing when I'm asked to speak, I want to know the ethos for the organization I'm speaking for. Ethos is a Greek term, that's your essence. Who are you? What's your culture? And read this, because it really, the mission statement and core values really drill down on the very issues I'm talking about. Now, Don said, okay, Mark, you're really passionate about West Virginia, and I was building a huge heart and vascular program in Charleston, and he said, why did I leave West? I get this a lot. I never really left. But there was a point where I had to take a team out, and I went back and forth from California. But why did I take some of this team away? Why did I start doing this? And it really does into one comment Dr. Nimitz made and Patrick made, and I'll get to that. I had 5 successes in the 90s, 3 of them with devices I developed with big companies, and 2 of them patents that I filed on my own that actually went on to be successful. One of them actually is a concept that has been iterated multiple times, and the company that just took that to it's actually become the standard of care for less invasive carotid surgery. The company was just sold to Boston Scientific for $1 billion. I'm not bragging about this, because it all goes back to just solving problems when you see patients have complications. But okay, so I have friends who are going, well, Mark, you should have made more money than you did on those things, right? And we're going to start our own company in Charleston. And at first I said, no. But finally, we decided to start something. They raised money. Next thing you know, they raised $5 million. And then I have medical device companies coming in and raised another $6 million. Really exciting. And we put the company in this building on Capitol Street. I brought business leaders in. And I put all my patents in it. I put everything I've made from all the other investments in it. I believed in it. And there we go. But I found that I couldn't get the engineering talent I needed. I tried everything. People I worked with for years, that I had relationships with in big companies, I couldn't get them here. I couldn't understand why. Now I do. Years later, I understand why. So it was really that question of the whole concept of a cluster. What is it? It's a place where usually it's where something nascent starts. A new technology starts to percolate up. In the medical device sector, it goes back 50 years. So those sectors, when a company is successful, it brings in these ancillary teams around it. You need ways to sterilize products. You need, all these other extrusion systems and all those things. You need that around you that builds up and starts getting momentum. That cluster concept is not only important for having resources, but the people that work there go back and forth between different startups, and so they have security. So it's hard to bring them out of a big company away on an island somewhere. And that's an important concept to understand. So the bottom line in this company, I had it ready to go public. It was going to be the first medical device company in West Virginia to go public. And the market collapsed 3 weeks before we went public. I found myself borrowing money against my house to make payroll. That's real. I always wonder what to call me. You call me a professor, a teacher, a surgeon, interventionalist, father. I never wanted to be called an entrepreneur. I thought it meant, greed, money. But then I looked up the definition of entrepreneur. It's so funny, right? It's the first time I looked it up. And it means actually believing in something so much that you're willing to take responsibility for it. That's all. It's really what the country's built on. And then I acquiesced. Okay, I'm an entrepreneur. It was really tough. Subsequently, I've had multiple good wins and some other failures. But I've taken every loss in the interim and learn from it. So why do projects fail? And I want you to I'm not going to go through this entire list, but most of them are driven by what I would consider lack of second-order thinking. What does that mean? So you're sitting here and you have a vision of something out there, and you're formalizing that vision. You have 2 years to figure it out. Are you going to do benchtop pharma work? Are you going to do medical devices? Are you going to do clinical trials? What are you going to do? Who are you going to be? What's your identity? And the problem is that it's hard. You can visualize it, but the second order thinking comes from the experiential side, knowing where the boundaries are and barriers. And if you can't, some of them you can never get through. No matter how hard you try, you keep beating your head against the wall. Visualizing and being able to see that is really important aspect. Bringing people in that have done it before so they can guide you through the storm. Out of all these things I haven't read, here's the key element in my life lessons thing I'll share with you. It's so important. You spend your whole journey in this program, the School of Osteopathic Medicine has this amazing reputation. But when you get into this space, it's not the worst thing than not having the right talent is partnering with the wrong people. About 15 to 20% of people that are startup CEOs or even CEOs of large companies are sociopaths. It's the same number of people, I'm not kidding, and there's data on this, and it's the same number of people in prison that are sociopaths, right? So, and I have made them, and they can be very charming. And I've had, the most difficult challenges I've had, other than that one company issue, has been partnering with the wrong people, because then they'll contaminate you, so be very careful about that. Oops, sorry about that. So who should you target? And as you're visualizing this, I would suggest starting by taking inventory of what's unique about this place. By place, I mean, it always starts with the people, and we talked about that, and you have really unique scientific talent. I've met some of them, not many, right? But I think take inventory of that and look for those people who are end user innovators. And they're often odd. Like, I would say I'm an odd dude. My wife would say that. I would like to be a Renaissance person. Say, no, you just have ADD, But look for that. Look for those unique players and cultivate it, right? Energy, and you'll see that they're ruminating and they need an outlet. So you look for that and find where your strengths are and who you can cultivate and champion ideas. The other is place. I mean, this is one of my favorite places in the world. I've traveled a lot around the world and done cases in 9 different countries and scrubbed, I think this is a really cool drawing card. And I think we've talked about some of the other beautiful things about this. The other thing I talk about anymore is what's called innovation theater, and we see a lot of these sort of innovations terms overused. Yeah. And a lot of people are looking for money and grants and things, and particularly with AI, they can really give you a great storyline and create some models. So be careful about that. Validate things that you're going to invest in. You're going to invest your energy. You're asking for people to come in here, but you're actually co-investing with them. You're investing your reputation and part of who you are with that. So that's a really important thing, because you'll end up building this bridge to nowhere. And it's really awkward when you realize you've kind of been on some weird journey like that. I had AI make this picture, but it's not, I like the pictures you showed earlier a lot better. But visualize what the future looks like, and then get the right people around you, and you will make it happen. It all comes down to the narrative, and it comes down to actually doing the right thing. And it can't be for something some money or prestige, or it has to be something that's really organic and drives you and motivates you. So innovation is not a science, but rather an art that is based on science and fueled by compassion and empathy. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bates. And now, Mr. Brian Brown.
Good morning. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. It's kind of hard to follow a presentation like that. I'm honored to be in the presence of one of West Virginia's original life science innovators in Dr. Bates, and one of the industry's staunchest advocates in Patrick Plews. So appreciate being on the stage today with these guys. Also applaud President Nemitz and Dr. Panath and Don Smith and the faculty and researchers here at WVSOM for embarking on this initiative to enhance opportunities, not just for the students and researchers, but for the benefit of Lewisburg, Greenbrier County, Southern West Virginia, and the state as a whole. You know, the school's commitment in building this new state-of-the-art facility and your efforts to populate it with biomedical researchers, it's not only exciting but critical to furthering West Virginia as a prime location to conduct life science research, make discoveries, and grow innovative companies. As many know, and as these two fellows have alluded to, the road to success in biotech and the pharmaceutical industry is long and very difficult. But by providing the infrastructure, the brain power, the initiative, WVSOM is creating the opportunity for life science industry growth here in the region. And we know it can be done here. Mylan was founded just down the road. So imagining the future and creating it obviously are two different things. It takes funding to discover, to test, and approve life science innovations. Excuse me. And our researchers and entrepreneurs obviously need all the help they can get. Our partners in the state and federal government play a significant role in spurring life science industry research and spin-out company development. And I'm going to talk a little bit about a couple of those programs that I think, number one, are certainly important in the life science industry today, and will be important, I believe, for WVSOM in populating the new lab space moving forward once that facility is constructed. So the federally funded Small Business Innovation Research and Small Business Technology Transfer grant programs are powerful tools for small businesses to access federal funding for R&D and commercialization. And I envision the new facility as a very enticing option for researchers working under these federal grants. West Virginia has an SBIR, STTR state matching grant program, and that offers a great incentive for researchers and companies to locate here. The Biosciences Association that I represent advocated and passed legislation in, I think, 2019 that created the state matching grant program. And that program to date has been, again, successful in not just encouraging new research here in the state, but also bringing in federal dollars that lead to hiring individuals, that lead to paying for lab space and kind of churning our economy. The program incentivizes companies to apply for these federal grants. It helps them offset the costs of research and commercialization, and again, brings significant federal dollars to West Virginia. I don't know what the federal to state the return on investment is, but I believe it's something, and maybe Kelsey, you guys may know this, I don't know, but it's like 5 to 1, 8 to 1, state dollars to federal dollars. So it's a heck of a program. I'd also like to mention, or take the opportunity to mention, that the SBIR program are currently set to expire on September 30th. So on behalf of Bio West Virginia, I'd ask for our congressional representatives' support and consideration for passing an extension of these programs to give both small businesses and federal agencies certainty that these vital programs will not expire or be disrupted. It's a real important issue, and I believe that our congressional delegation is in support of extension, but certainly want to remind them of that upcoming deadline. I'd also like to offer our organization's thanks to Senator Capito for her efforts to get National Institutes of Health funding released and for pushing for a funding increase for the agency. NIH awarded $54 million, as you may have seen in one of Patrick's slides, to West Virginia institutions in FY 2024. That investment supported over 700 good-paying jobs, generated close to $150 million in economic activity. These are jobs in labs and hospitals and universities and biotech companies that keep our young folks here and that attract companies, new businesses. Congressman Miller, as we saw last night, or heard from last night, is also a strong advocate for university research and medical supply chain resiliency. And I would also like to point out Governor Morrissey's development office, led by Secretary Herridge, is demonstrating its commitment to attracting and retaining life science companies and the jobs that they provide. Kelsey, who I believe speaks next, and works for the development office, may speak in more detail about the office's efforts, but I'd like to offer our appreciation for all the work that you guys have done in being active in this industry and working to create policy that helps lure the industry and grow the industry here, but also going out across the country, attending the Bio International Convention and other meetings to try and grow support for building the industry here. So thank you for that. I think one other thing that I'd encourage the school to take a look at is to tap into West Virginia's network of assistance providers, life science industry assistance providers. So there's multiple organizations and entities operating in the state with the mission to help commercialize research, apply for SBIRs, secure funding, and so much more. And I think that is one area that can certainly help your student researchers or faculty researchers when it comes to commercializing the research that's been developed here in this new facility. So I want to thank Dr. Nemitz for hosting this bio forum. Events like these certainly are critical to raising awareness and the profile of this important sector. As you can see, I think, yes, the slide behind me, Bio West Virginia will be hosting our annual West Virginia Bioscience Summit on September 30th in Morgantown. And I'd encourage those interested to please join us and come and attend. We'll feature many entrepreneurs and companies and researchers that are working in the industry. It will be held at the former Mylan production facility, now known as the WVU Innovation Corp. In Morgantown, which is just an amazing facility. And WVU has done a heck of a job over the past several years building out that facility as an incubator for life science companies, many of which will be on display at our conference. So with that, I'd just like to say I'm very excited for this new facility. I'm very excited for the promise that it holds for in many ways expanding the boundary of the life science industry in West Virginia South. And I would encourage the school to, as these two both have referenced, to kind of work within and develop a cluster. But I think also we kind of need to develop it here. I think that's where we're seeing success. I haven't seen a Pfizer or a Genentech or a Biogen or whomever else locate in West Virginia in the past 15 years. I think we have to grow it here. And I think that Marshall and WVU to this point have done a great job of nurturing and nurturing their small companies, commercializing research. And I think that certainly we can do that here in Greenbrier County. So thank you all for your time. I appreciate being here.
Thank you, gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, another round of applause for our panelists this morning. We will now take a brief break until 10:10. We encourage you to take this opportunity to check around the room and visit the tables of some of the resources available here at WVSOM and the Greenbrier Valley area. Again, we will break until 10:10. Thank you.